Silence isn't weakness. It's weaponized calm. There's a type of man the modern world doesn't recognize anymore. He doesn't speak to be heard, doesn't shout to be respected, doesn't explain, doesn't justify. He carries something most men lost. Not charisma, not charm, presence. The kind that changes a room's temperature when he enters. Not because he demands attention, because he doesn't need it. The world calls this weakness. Sees silence, calls it timidity. Sees calm, calls it passivity. Sees control, calls it fear. But anyone who stood in the arena knows different. Silence isn't absence of strength, it's containment. The difference between a dog barking behind a fence and a wolf in darkness. One makes noise because it must. The other waits because it can. Maximus didn't talk much. When he commanded legions, he led with few words. When he lost everything, family, title, freedom, he stayed silent. When they threw him in the arena as a slave, 50,000 screaming for blood, he didn't perform, didn't explain his pain. He fought, survived. And when they asked his name, he gave them nothing. Not because he feared, because they hadn't earned it. That's the power most men never understand. The power of withholding, not giving yourself away cheap, saving your words, your energy, your reaction for when it matters. The weak man spills everything, talks when he should listen, reacts when he should observe, defends when he should ignore, desperate to be seen, validated, understood. That desperation bleeds through every word, every gesture, every explanation nobody asked for. The strong man knows silence is a weapon, not the weapon of the coward who hides, the weapon of the warrior who conserves. He doesn't waste energy on pointless battles, doesn't burn out proving what he already knows, doesn't need strangers to confirm what he built in private. His strength isn't loud, it's deep, rooted, unmovable. When the storm comes, when everything falls apart, he's still standing, not because he screamed loudest, because he held the line in silence. The Stoics understood this. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire and wrote his philosophy in private, not for crowds, for himself. Epictetus was a slave who became one of the greatest teachers of his time, didn't beg for freedom, built it internally. Seneca faced death with more dignity than most men face Monday morning, not because he was fearless, because he'd trained his mind to stay calm when everything burned. Modern men confused reaction with strength, noise with power, performance with presence. They think the man who talks most is strongest, who reacts fastest is bravest, who explains most is most honest. It's the opposite. The man who talks most reveals insecurity, who reacts fastest shows lack of control, who explains constantly proves he doesn't believe his own worth. Real strength is quiet, doesn't announce itself, doesn't need validation, doesn't perform. It simply is, and everyone feels it. Not because it's loud, because it's solid, unshakable, the kind of presence that makes other men straighten their backs without knowing why. That makes chaos settle just by existing in the space. Watch how Maximus moves, doesn't rush to speak, doesn't fill silence with nervous words. When Commodus tries to humiliate him, he doesn't defend. When the crowd demands a show, he doesn't give theater. When men try to provoke him, he doesn't take bait. He waits, observes, calculates, and when he moves, it's with precision, purpose, the kind of control that only comes from years of disciplining the self. This is weaponized calm, not the calm of the man who gave up, the calm of the man who saw hell and walked through it, who was broken and rebuilt himself, who lost everything and discovered he didn't need most of it. This man doesn't fear silence because he's comfortable in his own presence, doesn't fear being alone because he knows himself, doesn't fear judgment because he stopped living for approval. The modern world is terrified of silence, fills every moment with noise, music, screens, notifications, conversations that say nothing, all designed to avoid the one thing most men can't handle, being alone with their thoughts, sitting in silence with who they actually are, facing the gap between the man they pretend to be and the man they know themselves to be. So they talk and talk, hoping if they make enough noise, they won't hear the truth. Silence forces truth. Sit in it long enough and you can't lie anymore, can't pretend, can't perform. You're left with what's real. Most men aren't ready. They built entire identities on performance, On what they say, not what they do. On how they appear, not who they are. Strip away the noise, there's nothing left. No foundation, no core. Just fragile image held together by constant validation from people who don't matter. The man who built himself in silence doesn't have that problem. He's not performing, he's being. His identity isn't dependent on audience reaction. It's rooted in actions, in choices he makes when nobody's watching, in discipline he maintains when there's no reward, in standards he holds when it would be easier to let them slip. Real strength. Not strength of the stage, strength of the foundation. This is what happens. You stop needing to prove yourself, stop reacting to every slight, stop defending every accusation. You know who you are. You tested yourself, built yourself. No amount of noise from outside can shake what you constructed inside. They can call you weak. You know you carried weight they couldn't imagine. They can call you passive. You know you made harder decisions in silence than they made in their lives. They can call you whatever they want. Their opinion has no weight in the architecture of your character. Maximus understood this. In the arena, men would taunt him, try to provoke him, make him react emotionally so he'd make mistakes. He never did. Stayed calm, observant, let them burn energy on noise while he conserved his for the kill. And when the moment came, he moved. Clean, precise, final. That's the advantage. While everyone else performs, he prepares. While they talk, he thinks. While they react, he strategizes. When it matters, when the real test comes, he's ready, they're not. Most men never develop this because they're addicted to short-term validation of being seen. They need the likes, the comments, the approval. Constant confirmation that they exist, that they matter, that they're enough. That addiction makes them weak. Now they're dependent. Now they need the crowd. And the moment the crowd turns, the moment validation stops, they collapse. Because they built their sense of self on something external, something they can't control, something that was never real. The silent man builds different, builds on what he can control, his discipline, his actions, his word, his code. These don't change based on who's watching, don't fluctuate with public opinion, don't disappear when the crowd leaves. They're constant. That constancy becomes his strength, not fragile strength of image, unbreakable strength of integrity. Living this way, something shifts. You stop being moved by things that used to destroy you. Criticism that would have sent you spiraling barely registers. Betrayal that would have broken you confirms what you already knew about human nature. Loss that would have devastated you becomes another weight you carry with quiet dignity. Not because you don't feel it, you do, but you don't let it break your stride. Don't give it power to define you. You acknowledge it, process it, keep moving. This is what weaponized means. Not aggression, capability. Being so internally solid that external chaos can't penetrate. So clear in purpose that world's noise becomes irrelevant. So comfortable in silence that you don't need to fill it with performance. You become dangerous. Not because you're violent, because you're unshakable. And in a world full of men who crumble at first pressure, that makes you rare. Rarity has power. Look at men who changed history, who built something that lasted. Most weren't the loudest, weren't most charismatic, weren't the ones performing for crowds. They were the ones working in silence, building in private, training when no one watched, making decisions that wouldn't pay off for years, carrying weight nobody saw. When the moment came, when history needed someone who wouldn't break, they were ready, not because they were special, because they'd spent years becoming unbreakable in silence. That's the path, not path of the stage, path of the forge, where you take yourself into fire, alone, and you either melt or harden. Most men avoid the forge. Too hot, too painful, no audience to witness struggle, no validation to make it worth it. So they stay soft, comfortable, fragile, and they wonder why life breaks them, why every setback feels like the end, why they can't build anything that lasts, because they never went to the forge, never tested themselves in silence, never became something solid. Maximus went to the forge, not by choice, was thrown there, everything stripped, family murdered, title gone, freedom taken. Most men would have broken, would have begged, would have quit. He didn't. He took the fire and let it harden him, became something Rome itself couldn't break. Not because he was born unbreakable, because he chose to become it. Day after day, fight after fight, in silence, without audience, without applause, just the work, just the discipline, just the refusal to let fire consume him. That's the choice every man faces. Not once, every single day. Will you perform or build? Will you seek validation or strength? Will you live for the crowd or by a code? Most choose performance. Easier, more immediate, feels better short term, but it leaves you hollow, dependent, fragile. The other path is harder, lonelier. No one claps while you do it, but it makes you solid, independent, unbreakable. When everything falls apart, when the world turns hostile, when validation stops, you're still standing. Not because you're lucky, because you built yourself to last. Silence isn't weakness. It's the container that holds real strength, the discipline that prevents waste, the confidence that doesn't need proof, the power that doesn't need announcement. It's what remains when everything else is stripped away. In a world built on noise, on performance, on constant validation, the man who can stand in silence, comfortable in his own presence, carrying his own weight, living by his own code, that man becomes something the world can't break, can't buy, can't control. That's what they see in Maximus, not a gladiator, a man who refused to break, who carried his honor in silence, who didn't need their applause to know his worth, who stood in the arena alone and showed them what real strength looks like. Not loud, not performed, not explained, just lived. And when it was over, when he'd given everything, he didn't beg for recognition, didn't demand remembrance. He just let go, because he'd already done what he came to do, built something inside himself that an empire couldn't touch. That's the work. Building something internal that the external world can't reach, can't corrupt, can't destroy. You don't build that with words, with performance, with validation. You build it in silence, with discipline, with sacrifice, with the daily choice to be more than comfortable, to hold the line when no one's watching, to maintain the standard when it would be easier to let it slip. That's how you become weaponized, not against the world, against your own weakness, your own excuses, your own need for approval. And when you've done that work, when you've built that foundation, the noise doesn't matter. They can say whatever they want. You know what you are. You know what you carried. You know what you built. That knowing, that unshakable internal certainty, that's the weapon. Not against others. For yourself. The weapon that keeps you standing when everything falls. That keeps you moving when everyone stops. That keeps you silent when everyone screams. Silence isn't weakness. It's the sound of a man who already won the only battle that ever mattered. The battle with himself. And that battle isn't fought once. It's fought every morning when discipline calls and comfort whispers. Every moment when the easy path opens and the right path demands. Every time weakness offers an excuse and strength demands action. Most men lose this battle before breakfast. Before they even leave the house, they negotiate with themselves, make deals, promise they'll start tomorrow, next week, when things are better, when they feel ready. But the man who understands silence knows something they don't. You're never ready. You just begin. There's a violence to self-discipline that soft men can't stomach. Not physical violence, internal violence. The kind that demands you kill the part of yourself that wants to quit, that begs for comfort, that needs constant reassurance. Every man carries this weakness inside him. The difference is what he does with it. The weak man feeds it, listens to it, lets it guide his decisions, becomes its servant. The strong man starves it, ignores its voice, acts despite its protests, becomes its master. Watch a man for a week, not what he says, what he does when no one's watching, when there's no reward coming, no recognition, no applause. Does he maintain his standard, or does it slip? Does he keep his word to himself, or does he negotiate? Does he do what he said he'd do, or does he find reasons why today doesn't count? That tells you everything. Not his potential, not his intentions, his character. And character is either built in silence, or it doesn't exist at all. The arena doesn't care about your intentions, doesn't care about your reasons, doesn't care about your feelings. It only cares about one thing. Can you stand when everything in you wants to fall? Can you fight when every fiber screams to run? Can you maintain your code when breaking it would be so much easier? Maximus faced that test every single day, woke up in chains, surrounded by men who wanted him dead, forced to fight for the entertainment of people who murdered his family. Every morning he had a choice, break or harden. Most men would have broken. He hardened. That's what the forge does. It reveals what you're made of. And most men discover they're made of something softer than they thought. Made of excuses dressed up as reasons. Made of comfort disguised as wisdom. Made of fear pretending to be caution. The forge burns all that away, leaves only what's real. And for most men, what's real isn't much. Just the desperate need for someone else to save them, to validate them, to tell them they're enough. But no one's coming. No one can give you what you refuse to build yourself. This is the truth modern men avoid. You are alone, not in the sense of isolated, in the sense of responsible, alone with your choices, alone with your discipline, alone with the gap between who you are and who you claim to be. You can fill that gap with noise, with excuses, with blame, or you can fill it with work, with silence, with the daily decision to become something solid, something that doesn't need defending because it's undeniable. The weak man defends constantly, explains his failures, justifies his choices, blames his circumstances, always talking, always explaining, always seeking understanding from people who will never give it, because he built his identity on sand, on what others think, on validation he can't control. So he's forever at the mercy of opinion, forever dependent on approval, forever fragile. The strong man doesn't defend, doesn't explain, doesn't justify, not because he's hiding, because there's nothing to defend. He did what he said he'd do, kept his word, maintained his standard, built what he said he'd build. The evidence speaks. His life is the proof, and if someone doesn't see it, that's not his problem. He's not performing for them. He's building for himself. There's a specific kind of man who intimidates without trying, without posturing, without aggression. You feel it when he enters a room. Not fear exactly. Weight. Like gravity shifted slightly in his direction. He's not trying to dominate. Doesn't need to. His presence alone settles things, clarifies things, makes the chaos seem smaller. Not because he's loud, because he's solid. And solidity has its own authority. This man doesn't happen by accident. Doesn't happen because of genetics or luck or privilege. He's forged, day after day, choice after choice, sacrifice after sacrifice, in silence, when no one's watching, when there's no reward, when it would be easier to quit. He showed up anyway, did the work anyway, held the standard anyway. And that accumulated weight of discipline, of sacrifice, of keeping his word to himself, that's what you feel when he walks in. Not performance, presence. Most men will never build this because they can't handle the loneliness of it, can't handle doing the work without audience, without validation, without someone confirming they're on the right path. They need constant feedback, constant encouragement, constant proof that what they're doing matters. And the moment that external validation stops, they stop, because they were never building for themselves. They were building for approval, and approval is the weakest foundation a man can stand on. The silent man builds different, builds knowing no one will see most of it, knowing there will be no applause for the hardest moments, knowing he might do everything right and still lose, but he builds anyway, not because he's guaranteed success, because building is who he is, not what he does, who he is. And you can strip away his title, his possessions, his freedom, but you can't strip away what he built inside himself. That's his, permanent, unshakable. Commodus tried to break Maximus by taking everything, made him a slave, killed his family, destroyed his life, thought that would destroy the man, but he didn't understand. Maximus wasn't his title, wasn't his position, wasn't his possessions. He was his code, his honor, his refusal to break. And you can't kill that. You can kill the man, but you can't kill what he became. That lives forever. This is what modern men don't understand about strength. They think it's what you have, what you own, what you achieved. But real strength is what remains when all that's gone, when you're stripped to nothing, when there's no title to hide behind, no achievement to point to, no possession to prove your worth. What's left? For most men, nothing. Just the desperate realization that they built their entire identity on things that could be taken, on external validation that could be withdrawn, on performance that could be forgotten. But the man who built in silence, who disciplined himself when no one was watching, who maintained his code when breaking it would have been easier, that man discovers something else remains. Himself, real, solid, unbroken. Not because he never lost, because he never surrendered, never gave up what mattered, never compromised his core. And that core, forged in silence, tested in darkness, hardened through discipline, that's the weapon. Not a weapon against enemies, against himself, against his own weakness, his own excuses, his own desire to quit. That's the real battle, not the external fight, the internal one. The fight between the man you are and the man you could become, between comfort and growth, between what's easy and what's right. Every man faces this battle. Most surrender before it even begins, accept comfort, accept mediocrity, accept less than they're capable of, and they wonder why life feels empty. It feels empty because they're empty, filled nothing but noise and distraction, and the desperate hope that somehow, someday, something external will make them feel complete. But nothing external can fill an internal void. Nothing outside can fix what's broken inside. You can chase validation forever, chase success forever, chase recognition forever. And even if you catch it, it won't be enough, because the problem isn't what you lack, it's what you refuse to build. And building requires silence, requires turning off the noise, requires facing yourself without distraction, without excuse, without someone else to blame, just you and the gap between who you are and who you should be. Most men can't handle that mirror, can't handle seeing themselves clearly, so they avoid it, fill their lives with noise, with busy, with anything that keeps them from having to sit in silence with their own inadequacy. But the man who can sit in that silence, who can face that gap without flinching, who can acknowledge his weakness without surrendering to it, that man can change, can build, can become, because he stopped lying to himself, stopped pretending, stopped performing. And in that brutal honesty, in that uncomfortable silence, real transformation becomes possible. This is why silence is weaponized. Not because it's passive, because it's where the real work happens. Where you strip away the lies you tell yourself, where you face what you've been avoiding, where you decide who you're going to be instead of pretending you already are. That's terrifying. That's why most men avoid it. But that's also where power comes from. Real power, not the power of image, the power of substance. Maximus had nothing left but substance. No image to maintain, no performance to give, just himself. And himself was enough, more than enough. Because he'd spent his entire life building that self, not for show, for survival, for honor, for the code he lived by when everything else was stripped away. That's what carried him through hell. Not hope, not luck, not help, just his refusal to be anything less than what he built himself to be. That's available to every man, not the circumstances, the choice. The choice to build something internal that the external world can't touch, can't corrupt, can't destroy. To develop discipline that doesn't depend on motivation, to cultivate strength that doesn't need validation, to maintain standards that don't fluctuate with mood. That's the work. Unglamorous, unseen, unrewarded, but permanent. And when you've done that work, when you've built that foundation, something changes. The world's noise stops mattering. Opinion stops having weight. Validation stops being necessary. Not because you're arrogant, because you're complete. Built something inside yourself that doesn't need anything outside itself to be real, to be valuable, to be enough. That's freedom, real freedom. Not doing whatever you want, being whoever you are without apology, without explanation, without performance, just being, solid, clear, unmoved by chaos, unshaken by judgment, unbroken by loss. Standing in silence while the world screams. And that silence, that weaponized calm, that's not weakness. That's dominance.